What's up, everybody, and welcome to Fantasy Football Today DFS. My name is Sia Nejad, and today, during our early look at Week 4 and some lineup recaps, I've got a guest with me. And it's none other than friend of the show. She's been on this show twice already. Megan Shoup from Fanspeak. Megan, how are you?
I'm doing great, Sia. Yeah, I was thinking about it. I've gotten to join you twice during the summer to talk about like DFS process, best ball, but this is so exciting to be in season talking actionable football.
Actionable football. Yeah. And I honestly, so Megan, you were a part of last show. You listened to the last show,
Yep.
and you know this is like a very quick hitter thing. So
Right.
before we bring up QB, wide receiver, running back, tight end, a couple things to point out. One, it's on me, it's on us in terms of the FFT DFS contest. We got it out really late. Well, it's already ready. So all of you that were asking me on Tuesday and Wednesday for the FFT DFS contest, just know that it will be in the YouTube description. It will also be in the podcast description. It's $5. We'll definitely have it filled up like we did 2 weeks ago. But last week, again, we got it out late. So that's on us. Definitely make sure you get in there. We're going to look at the winner from last week. It was J. Carl09. We're going to take a look at his lineup at the very end of the show. Very good lineup. I don't think it had Raheem Mostert in it. And for the record, I'll just put it out there right now. I faded Raheem Mostert last week. So I didn't have
I pretty much did too. Yeah, same.
Listen, it's just one of those things. Like you're either going to, like I'm swinging for first. I'm not swinging for the middle of the road when it comes to the terms. I cashed in my cash games, or at least some of them. I think I had 2. I cashed in only one of the 2. We're going to see that lineup as well, just to show you how easy it can be to cash in those double ups. But long story short, Megan, I'll tell you right now, not the best week for me. You know, the first 2 weeks were great. Week 3 was not great for me. How about you?
You know, a single entry, I've been trying to play more single entry, 3 max and that kind of stuff. You know, that's key. And I did really well, a high finish in one single entry with I believe, a Herbert double stack that saved my week. Basically helped me just basically break even. But the rest of the lineups were not it. And that helped kind of the break even point.
Well, listen, Herbert's unstoppable. That was one of the stacks we liked last week.
Yes.
Cousins stacks, you know, those were popular stacks, but Herbert threw for over 400 yards. I mean, this guy is just truly unstoppable. No Mike Williams, no worries. You know, Josh Palmer is going to be in there. Maybe some Quentin Johnston action. We'll see when Austin Eckler comes back. But speaking of those very same Chargers, let's talk about, before we get into the QBs, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, some of the high total games. I'll just point them out real quick. I mean, these aren't necessarily the only games you should be investing in, but I just want to point them out so that you know them. That Raiders-Chargers game, it's a 48-point total. And what's really interesting there, and Meg, we'll talk about this later, because I know you pointed out, hey, Jimmy G might not be playing, you know, concussion protocol. And is it going to be Aiden O'Connell? I believe Brian Hoyer's still on the roster, but if it's Aiden O'Connell, I mean, that's a 4K guy. It's somebody that you might consider, Meg?
I think I would. I mean, honestly, I think Brian Hoyer is the backup, but McDaniels has not committed to him yet from what I researched last night. And I know per Twitter, you know, not that you listen to a fan base for obviously coaching decisions, but Raiders fans are would much rather see O'Connell, who looks really good in preseason, by the way.
Did.
Yeah. You know, because we obviously both play preseason DFS, but he looked really good in preseason. But so Raiders fans are calling for him to come in as opposed to Hoyer, who is obviously a game manager. And against a team like the Chargers, they probably just want to see if there's some upside there. And who knows, could this be the next Brock Purdy? I don't know. Maybe not. That's probably a long shot, but I might be willing to take a couple shots. But we have to wait and see on obviously the news. I think Jimmy G will be out, because rarely now I think our guys coming back within 1 week from a concussion, but it's just a question of who is the starter.
Especially reporting the symptoms after the game. I think that makes it a little bit more complex, and you have to be a little bit more cautious with something like that you don't catch right away as a team, as an organization. So that Raiders charge, and by the way, we've seen backup quarterbacks succeed on the Raiders just last year when Derek Carr was benched for Jarrett Stidham, who, by the way, is the backup for Denver and perhaps the better option in Denver. Just throwing that out there for all you Denver Bronco fans. But Raiders Chargers, that's one of 3 games, just so you know, on the 4 o'clock slate. So there's one 4:05 game, there's 2 4:25 games. And those games, by the way, it's Raiders, Chargers, Cards, Niners, Pats, Cowboys. I point that out because I love playing the afternoon slate, and you have those 3 games to choose from if you want to play the afternoon slate. The other games with high totals: Dolphins, Bills, 53.5, Vikings, Panthers, 46. That's high-ish. There's really some interesting plays there. We'll get into that. Andy Dalton, Kirk Cousins. You can stack that either way, in my opinion. Broncos, Bears, 2 bad quarterbacks, 2 bad defenses. Do you want to take the chance with a Russ Wilson stack or perhaps a Justin Fields stack. I did a lot of Justin Fields in my afternoon only lineups this last week, and it did not go well, obviously. So, again, that's the type of thing where it's like, oh, well, why would you do something like that? And it's like, again, I'm swinging for first. I understand Justin Fields has been terrible. I understand he's not a very good quarterback, but I was just hoping in a negative game script, maybe he could string some drives together with his legs, with his arms, and it obviously didn't work out. So those are the games with the high totals. I mentioned Raiders, Chargers. Let's go ahead and bring up the quarterbacks. But before we do that, let's hear one quick message from our partners.
Electrifying action is back to back to back on CBS Sports Network.
And let's bring up the quarterbacks. We have Nana behind the screen on the ones and twos helping us out here. And Meg, I'll start with some of the elite tier, and maybe you can tell me, we can talk about correlations too if we want, but I mean, you look at Josh Allen, and that's an obvious game, right? The thing is with that game, the pieces are going to be really expensive. Your Josh Allen to Stephon Diggs stacks, they're not cheap. And honestly, maybe that's going to lead to a lot of people kind of deferring to different stacks because maybe they just want to get pieces of that game and they want to, stack something else, something a lot more price conscious, if you will. And you look at Justin Herbert at 7,800, he's 400 less. Tua, 7,400. He's 800 less than Josh Allen. Then you get into the Kirk Cousins range. You get to Joe Burrow, who is at least interesting. Who of these kind of like top tier quarterbacks would you be interested in stacking? I understand it's Tuesday, but who would you be like any like 2 or 3 that you're interested in here?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just like last week, I kind of circled that Vikings-Chargers game and wanted the quarterbacks from both sides. And similar to that this week, I am very interested in both Josh Allen and Tua in the highest total on the slate. I do think this one could really be fireworks and shootout. So probably those two and Herbert at the top are the ones that are really jumping out to me. And now, of course, Herbert has a little more condensed, targets and some cheaper options, but which we'll get to in receivers. And then I do think I have some interest in a cheap Andy Dalton because he really put up some numbers last week, and against the Vikings defense, you can do that as well. And then the Burrow thing, the last thing I'll mention is the Burrow thing. I know I mentioned a fourth or fifth one there, but the Burrow thing, the injury to the calf makes me nervous. But every week I'm going to circle the Titans defense. Pass funnel, look for it. Deshaun Watson has not looked good as the Browns quarterback. He looked good last week. So maybe it's a little Burrow if you feel like he's kind of doing a little better on that calf.
Yeah, and especially, we saw it yesterday, like even when he's not doing well on the calf, he just zeroes in on Jamar Chase, and Jamar Chase just happens to catch like literally everything that's thrown his way. Whereas, you can't really say the same about T. Higgins. Like I understand T. Higgins is going to get some targets too. He has some touchdown equity, but if you're stacking Burrow, it's definitely with Jamar Chase. Right. I don't think I'm going to get to Joe Burrow, but I do think it's interesting because I don't think a lot of people are going to get to Joe Burrow. So it makes him kind of a contrarian build, especially, coming off that calf injury and things of that nature. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I like the Herbert stacks. The guy throws for over 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. Tua is certainly an obvious consideration. I don't think I'm going to go there against the Bills, but I got to say, even though the Commanders got completely worked by the Bills, it's not like Sam Howell, at least in the first half, wasn't moving the ball against this Bills defense. He just kept throwing interceptions. I mean, it's a good Bills defense, but it's also kind of a bend, don't break defense where you can pass for a lot of yards and you can run the ball against the Bills. It's just one of those things where, can you actually punch it in and score touchdowns? And the Dolphins have proved they can absolutely do that. So we have a question. Any thoughts on Stroud? So Stroud's matchup, remind me, scroll down a little bit. Nada, Stroud plays who again? Stroud. There we go. Stroud is playing at home against Pittsburgh.
That's a tough defense, tough pass rush. But I mean, he's been putting up numbers and has looked really efficient of all the rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah, I don't think I would get there. I mean,
I don't think I'll get there this week, though. I agree.
Here's the reality. If you're going to do a stack and you're trying to be price conscious, you scroll right down to Andy Dalton. I mean, I'm sorry. Like this matchup
Vikings
is too
defense.
good.
Yeah.
We knew going into last week that Andy Dalton was an upgrade, at least for his receivers from a fantasy standpoint versus Bryce Young. So I really think Andy Dalton stacks are in play, or at least run backs in that Carolina game are in play. So if I'm going cheap with a stack, I'm skipping over CJ Stroud. I'm paying $5,100 for Andy Dalton. I'm pairing him with either DJ Shark or Adam Thielen, obviously, or both. And I'm obviously running it back with like a Justin Jefferson, assuming he's healthy. I think he just had cramps at the end of that game. You could actually run it back with multiple big priced options in that Minnesota game if you really want to, given that, you're going to be saving so much money. But that Andy Dalton stack is really going to allow you, if you're willing to do it, it's going to allow you to do so many things at the high-priced running back, high-priced receiver positions. And honestly, I think that's a good segue to move to running back right now. Let's look at the top of this board. There wasn't, when I took an initial look here, there weren't a lot of running backs I really wanted to pay up for. Right. I mean, listen, CMC at home against Arizona. The cool thing about Arizona is they're pushing back. Exactly. So we can't really start talking about Arizona in the context of, well, it's going to be a blowout and they're going to sit CMC in the second half. Like, that's just not really a thing right now in Arizona. So at 9,200, he's certainly priced appropriately. But Meg, I'm curious, like, I know we haven't completely diagnosed, what our correlations are going to be. Are you going to try to fit CMC in your lineups, knowing that you like the Josh Allens of the world, the Tuas of the world, the Keenan Allens and Justin Herbert stacks with perhaps in that game, perhaps a Devontae Adams run back? Like, there's so many high price guys to consider. Do you get to CMC, you think?
I don't think I will much, but I will say I do think that would be the contrarian build. I think the more common build that myself and probably a lot of others early in the week want to do is stack up these high total games, stack up these top quarterbacks that we just mentioned with some of those obviously top receiver options like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen. Of course, we're going to want to do that. But I think you're probably only going to be able to get two expensive receivers, probably have to pay down. That's what kind of worked last week. I could see myself doing that a lot again this week. So I think I'll be more in the mid to cheaper running backs. However, I do really think CMC, Josh Jacobs, good matchup against the Chargers, and obviously they're going to have to lean on him a little more, could be a more contrarian build to flip it and pay up for running back at least at one or two spots.
I totally agree with the Jacobs take. That's somebody I'm definitely considering, especially knowing that people are probably they're going to want to build Herbert stacks. I mean, maybe Aiden O'Connell Hoyer stacks, but I mean, the classic like sort of pay up is going to be Justin Herbert to Keenan Allen, maybe a double stack. You're going to throw in Josh Palmer there. Maybe you'll get tricky with like a Gerald Everett or a Quentin Johnston. But if it's me and I'm looking at like cash oriented lineups, it would be Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer. That makes just way too much sense. And they're probably going to want to run that back with Devontae Adams, maybe Jacoby Myers. But because of Jacob's stock right now, it's just not something that people want to invest in, even at 7,100, which is a very reasonable price. But if you were to just assume, hey, Jacobs gets a lot of work, the Raiders run a lot of clock, then maybe you just have like Jacobs on one side and Keenan Allen on the other, and you stack a different game. Now you're getting double leverage because of, Meg, what you said. It's going to be kind of a contrarian build, at least as it pertains to that game.
I like that a lot. And I think they're going to have to lean on him, obviously, giving him as many carries as he can handle, but also maybe he gets more checkdowns this week.
Yeah, I agree. Let me ask you, in or out on Raheem Mostert? Like, listen, I mean, obviously he had an amazing game. A-Chain had more carries than Raheem Mostert. I mean, Mostert just ran really good. Now they're playing at Buffalo. It's clearly a split backfield that Mostert might not even have the advantage in from a touch standpoint. Mostert at 6,500 is that I'm out on that. But listen, I faded him last week and I paid the price for it. So I mean, I'm in and out on Mostert at 6,500.
I'm in, but not all in. So I want some exposure possibly in that game stack situation. Maybe I do like an Allen stack, and in some cases I don't bring it back with Hill and I bring it back with Mostert, something like that. I think, I think last week was hard to use as a judgment because, they just blew him out by so much. So, but he has looked great. And, I just want to attach myself to Mike McDaniel offense. And if sometimes it has to be to come from the running back position, I mean, he's looked great. So I'm in, but not all in on Mostert.
I get it. I completely get it. Another guy I wanted to ask you about. So I'll just list a couple more running backs that I like that are on this screen. By the way, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit the like button. If you're not watching us on YouTube, shame on you, but hopefully you're at least listening to the podcast right now. Go ahead and review the podcast if you can, but certainly register for our FFT DFS contest, which is in the podcast description. Alvin Kamara is interesting at home against Tampa Bay. I don't think I'm getting there at 6,100. I can't guarantee he's going to get a full complement, but they definitely need to lean on him, obviously, because their running back room is really injured. I almost prefer like a Zach Moss, who got, by the way, 30 carries last week, and he got 3 targets. He caught 2 of them. I mean, his workload is just insane. I think Connor's interesting at 5,900. Anybody on this screen between this like 5,800 and 7,000 mark that you're interested in?
The 5,800 up, it's really, I think I am going to be paying down a little bit
Mhm.
under that, but I do have some interest in Moss there. I think that one and Connor, just if you were doing any kind of 49ers, whether it was a mini stack or stack with Purdy, I don't mind Connor just from a volume perspective. He's just kind of a volume monster right now. So those would be the ones I'd be most interested there, but and again, I already mentioned Mostert, but I'm probably looking to pay down a little bit under 5,800 if possible.
Yeah, fair enough. Feel free. Any other sort of pay, and Nada, we can scroll down a little bit here. Any other sort of cheaper options? And I'll mention this. We didn't mention Purdy when we talked about the quarterbacks, but I mean, obviously a Purdy stack is in play here with some sort of it could be a James Conner run back. It could be Marquise Brown. It could be Rondale Moore. There's a lot of things you can do with that game. You could double stack it back. I think a Purdy to CMC stack is in play.
That's always in play. Yeah.
It's the Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert situation. So that makes sense. Any other cheap running backs? I mean, listen, the Josh Kelly experience hasn't really worked out. If you want to go back to it now that he's 5,300, well, he's been in that range anyway, but I don't hate that. I think Javonte Williams is interesting at 5,500 in a very good matchup at Chicago. Hopefully he starts to get more carries in a neutral game script since, they've been down 50 points in some of these games. So it's not really going to be the Javonte Williams show as much as Samaje Perine. Those are guys I'm interested in this cheaper range. Anybody that is looking good to you?
You pretty much hit on it. Javonte Williams in that matchup, and then Jerome Ford. I mean, he looked great. I was out on him last week against that Titans defense, but he has looked really great so far. And listen, Moss was able to run on Baltimore last week. So I like Jerome Ford as probably my favorite cheap option at this point of the week.
Yeah, I totally agree. Listen, Ford against Tennessee, he didn't do a lot in the rushing department. He did catch that touchdown, but this is a much better matchup. This Baltimore defense is really banged up and they can be exposed. We saw Zach Moss do it. If Zach Moss can do it, then Ford can do it behind his offensive line. And I'm not really afraid of Kareem Hunt there. As far as cheaper options, I don't think we need to go there. Let's go to receiver. During our game-by-game breakdown with Mike McClure, we'll obviously talk about some of the value that has opened up because of injuries, because of potential inactives. We'll have a lot more information there on Friday. At the top of the board here, I mean, listen, Justin Jefferson, he makes a lot of sense. We can scroll up a little bit, Nana. There's so many guys at the top I like, and it's the top three in particular. Jefferson, Hill, I should say Diggs and Adams, Keenan Allen. I should say the top five.
The top five, yeah.
Let me ask you this, because I look at this and I think, well, what correlations do I want? I really like the Justin Herbert stack to Keenan Allen, maybe double stack with Josh Palmer and bringing it back with Devontae Adams, who, by the way, had 20 targets last week. He only caught 13 of them. And Keenan Allen also 20 targets last week. He caught 18 of them. So these guys are absolute monsters. That would be in a cash game. That would be my favorite stack by far. It would be Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, maybe Josh Palmer, bring it back with Devontae Adams. So I know I'm going to be playing a lot of those two receivers. I might not be on Jefferson, Hill, or Diggs. I just might not be able to afford it. Right. Who are you liking in this top five?
Like you said, it's so hard to narrow it down, right? Because the top five, not only are they talent, but now the volume and target monsters. So it's hard. I mean, that probably is my favorite stack that you just said, but I really do love that Bills Dolphins game. So I see myself getting a lot of Hill. I don't know if I'll get as much. I love Diggs. And if I can do a stack with Hill and Diggs, that would be obviously desirable, but I might do something where I play like a Tua Hill and then run it back with a cheaper option from Buffalo. Cause there are a few cheaper. I forgot to mention James Cook. He's kind of mid-priced, getting a lot of workload, but not the high value touches around the end zone, but still getting a lot of carries and a few targets. So maybe I run it back with him or like a tight end from Buffalo that's cheaper, or a Gabe Davis that we'll get down to. So I see the stack that you mentioned and then Hill, and I'm not going to fade Jefferson, but I don't think I'll have as much Jefferson as I did say last week, just because he's just so hard to get to at that price.
Yeah, and again, if you build the Andy Dalton stacks with one of his two receivers or both of them, and you bring it back with Justin Jefferson, it's very likely you can afford one of these other high-priced receivers. So if you want to play it that way, that's what the Andy Dalton stacks are going to allow you to do if you're so inclined to do that. A.J. Brown at 7,700 is at least interesting to me, because we know this Washington defense, while it's good, it can absolutely be exposed. The concentrated targets to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, that's pretty much a wrap when it comes to the actual targets on the Philadelphia Eagles offense. So I like that. Let's scroll down a little bit, because what I really want to get into, Megan, here is some of the value Puka Nacua, let's stop there at 6,700. That's at least interesting. I probably won't pay 6,700 for Puka Nacua, even though I'm not saying it's overpriced by any means, but because I'm paying so much for some of those high-end receivers, I'm probably looking for value as I go down the board. And if we could keep scrolling down, because I want to start seeing some names in that, okay, we can stop there. Like Jordan Addison is interesting to me in a game that I'm likely going to want to stack. DJ Moore, if you feel like that Justin Fields like experience might actually go off against Denver of all defenses, which would be a decent argument, then I think a DJ Moore stack is at least interesting. Whether they're on this board or not, Meg, how about some receivers that you're interested in that maybe aren't super expensive?
Yeah, in this mid-range, obviously Gabe Davis in that high total game. I like that. I agree with you on the Addison call. I'd say I would probably, the way I saw that they utilized Tutu Atwell last night, they got him a ton of targets and really manufactured touches. And so I would probably pay down for Tutu Atwell over Puka Nacua, just because, again, we got to save money here this week. So probably more interested in Tutu than Puka Nacua. You know, George Pickens and Sutton are very nice options in this range too. I just don't know that I'll be able to get there, because I could see myself doing more of the kind of like last week, 2 higher price receivers, 2 lower price receivers. And I don't know that I'll get a ton in this range, unfortunately, but there are guys here that I just mentioned. And
I mean, Cortland Sutton's a guy here at 5,300. He got a ton of targets. He probably should have had another touchdown or two if Russell Wilson wasn't so off. And as a Washington fan, I'm really glad we lost out on the Russell Wilson sweepstakes a few years ago. Not that Sam Howell's necessarily better than Russell Wilson. I hope he is. But the long and short of it is that contract was pretty bad. So Nico Collins at 5,100. I don't think I'll get there. We can scroll down a little bit because there are guys real quick I want to touch on. Tank Dell at 4,600. There's certainly value there at home against Pittsburgh. Adam Thielen, there he is at 4,500. That's just a great price. He's going to be chalky for obvious reasons. I mean, I'm assuming Andy Dalton's playing next week, by the way. I'm assuming it's not Bryce Young, but obviously everything changes if it's Bryce Young. We can scroll down even more, because I want to look at DJ Shark. That's another one at 4,000. Rashid Shaheed. There's Josh Palmer at 4,000.
I think he could be chalk probably, because everybody's going to like the stack that we like. So yeah.
And for the record, that's okay, especially in cash games. In your double, I mean, it's okay for tournaments too, to some degree, but in your cash games, listen, roll out that stack of Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer with Justin Herbert. That's probably going to pay off. Marvin Mims is interesting. I'll just touch on Quentin Johnston. Calvin Austin's really cheap, and we saw him catch a long bomb, and with Deontay Johnson out, I think he's at least interesting. I think he's like 3,400. So that's another interesting guy. Let's go ahead and move to tight end real quick, and we'll just touch on it for a couple minutes, because we're going to try to keep this basically a 30-minute show. So we'll touch on tight ends, Megan, and then we're just going to go over to recapping just 2 lineups from last week, including our DFS winner. Not a lot to say here for me. I mean, obviously we're always trying to pay down for tight end if we can, unless there's just really good value up top. Certainly TJ Hawkinson qualifies as really good value up top. So I'm okay with that. I think Gerald Everett is interesting, as there might be some targets that open up for him with Mike Williams out. But what we see, unfortunately, with Gerald Everett, as good as he is, I still think he's talented. Donald Parham does get some of that touchdown equity. So you're just going to have to roll the dice there and hope you catch the right side of variance. Zach Ertz is there. Cole Turner, who had 7 targets last week and caught 5 of them. I mean, he's a tremendous value.
Almost got a touchdown. He was on the 1 yard line. It was so close. I was watching it live, and it was very hard to see, because I bet his anytime.
Oh no. Yes. That's terrible. It's
down at the 1. Yeah.
It's a great bet, and it's a great bet for DFS, because he's going against Philly, which, they allow a decent amount to the tight end, but he's also 2,700. Like, his price didn't move. Now Logan Thomas might be back, but honestly, that concussion he sustained a couple weeks ago,
looked bad.
That felt like you're going to be out for a few weeks condition. So we'll have to wait and see on that. By the way, if he's active, he's 3,100, so he's certainly playable if you want to go that route. Any tight ends you're looking at?
You named a lot of the ones that are sticking out to me. I think I will, again, be paying down at this position too. So probably Everett and Cole Turner are my 2 favorites. I also will mention the guys in that if I'm paying up a little bit more, I don't mind like a Jake Ferguson or a Pat Freiermuth, just because of their talent and targets at that. Well, you'd like Freiermuth to get a little more targets, but talent and targets for those prices still in that 3,500 range. And then I will just mention the guys in that very low total. You've got Kincaid and Knox for Buffalo and Smythe for the Dolphins. Smythe was getting a lot. He didn't do much last week, but he was running a lot of routes. So I just think they're so cheap, and they're they're just viable options in a high total game. None of them got there last week, but again, in a high total game for that under, I believe they're all 3K or under is something I might consider.
I love that. No, that's great. Okay, so listen, let's take a quick look at our two lineups. Well, one from FFT DFS and one is going to be our cash game lineup. But before we do that, one more quick break from our partners. Maybe. And we're back. Okay. No break. That actually saves us some time. So let's try to put up the FFT DFS lineup, the winner of that contest. It was Carl09. I think we have that. Nada, let me know if we don't. And if we don't, we can just kind of talk about it. But Carl09 put up a pretty great lineup, but it didn't have Raheem Mostert. We see it here on YouTube. He had Tua. Well, that's great. He correlated it with Tyreek Hill. Kenneth Walker was somebody we talked about. We probably should have talked about him some more in our game-by-game preview. Travis Etienne didn't do him any favors, but Adam Thielen, that's a really smart play at 3,900, especially knowing you're getting the consistency of what Andy Dalton provides against a Seattle defense that is just kind of okay. So great game from Adam Thielen. He had Amari Cooper, great game from him. You mentioned Smythe. Didn't have a good game. Zay Flowers didn't have a good game, but he also had the Bills defense. So
that's huge.
This is a lineup that it didn't have Raheem Mostert, but still took it down. So that's actually pretty impressive. And then we can move to my cash game lineup real quick before we get out of here. Listen, I didn't have a good week, but what do we say about not having good weeks? Maybe you get involved in some double ups. Make sure some of your bankroll is double up involved. So cash game involved, so that at least you can try to sustain some of your bankroll when you have those bad tournament weeks, which I did. So here's what I did. I mean, listen, this lineup is Herbert, Ford, Kendre Miller, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Mike Williams, Smythe, Tank Dell, and the Commanders defense. What I tried to do here was just jam in the receivers. Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill.
I did the exact same thing.
So, I mean, listen, it cost me at the running back position, particularly with Kendre Miller. The Washington defense wasn't anything great, and Smythe wasn't anything great. But we knew these guys were going to get targets. I mean, there were other guys that got targets just like this. Like, you could have put Keenan Allen in here. There's the Devontae Adams wasn't on the main slate. But the point is, I'm just jamming in as many points as I can, and then I'm taking the cheap options elsewhere. I've got the right stack with Herbert and Williams. This was an easy cash, and it was a pretty good lineup. It didn't have Raheem Mostert. And again, it's a cash game lineup, so it didn't need it. But this is how you play cash games. Just jam the points in, get a nice little stack going in a high-end game, and that's pretty much a wrap. Speaking of pretty much a wrap, we try to make this a 30-minute show. Megan, this was great. I love your insight. We're going to obviously have to have you back. But
I had a blast.
You got 30 seconds. So tell us how you're feeling about the Week 4 slate, and tell us where we can find you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually feeling good. There's six divisional games, I think, which is wild to me. But there's ones that I really like that Bills game, that Chargers game. So yeah, I think I'm kind of early feeling good about it. And you can find all my work over at fanspeak.com and follow me on Twitter at Megs08DFS.
All right. Well, that's Meg. I'm Sia. This is Fantasy Football Today DFS. Stay tuned on Friday. It's me and Mike McClure for our game-by-game breakdown. You are not going to want to miss it. We'll see you on Friday on Fantasy Football Today DFS.